It's such a timely episode being this month about it. So my guest today is Dr. Matthew Herford, and we're going to talk about specifically May being Mental Health Awareness Month, and May 16th is Mental Health Action Day, an effort to help Pennsylvanians who struggle with mental health. Pennsylvania ranks sixth in the nation in providing quality mental health services and fourth in the nation specifically for quality youth mental health care. Dr. Matthew, thanks for stopping by and thank you for your service because, again, we sometimes do not thank the professionals that help our children, especially. And I'm going to really have a good conversation regarding this with mental health. It's, again, since COVID, just a tough situation, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, Neil. And thank you so much for having me on and for shining a light on mental health. May is, as you said, Mental Health Awareness Month, but it's a part of our whole health every month out of the year. So taking the time in May to really take a closer look at the impact mental health has on our lives and hopefully raise awareness, reduce stigma, get people connected to treatment and care, and just get a conversation started around mental health is so critically important.
I can go into basically breaking this down simply, but it is an education show, and we've discussed this so much. I want to hammer out the most important things: our children. I have another podcast that I co-host that I nationally syndicate that talks about. It's called "Vote for the Other Guy," but it's really about kids. We're leaving kids behind left and right, and we're not looking at the best interest for children, especially what they're going through, the amount of suicides, the
Mhm.
amount of medications and situations, especially our teens. This is basically what your focus is on as children, and it's great to know that you guys are serving such a great area in the Pennsylvania area. But what is the problem you think that's happening that so many kids are having mental health issues, especially?
It's a great question. And I don't think there's one simple answer to it. But one of the things that's important to recognize is that kids have been suffering with behavioral health challenges and emotional problems really for quite a long time. One of the things that has likely changed, especially over the last 5 to 10 years, is been the ability to talk more openly about what kids are going through. There's no question that the COVID pandemic had a huge impact on the social and emotional health of young people. But what was happening at the same time, and some could say as a result of that pandemic, is a lot more people started talking about the fact that it was okay to not feel okay. And what we saw was a lot of high profile celebrities, public figures, athletes, uh, actors, politicians talking about their emotional health and their, in some cases, substance use disorders as well. And that extended, into young people. And as a result, what people saw was that people they admired, people they looked up to, people they identify with, talking about their emotional health, about their mental health, and I think really importantly, talking about the fact that when they got treatment, when they actually took that step to get care, they got better. And so it completed the circle for them. Okay to talk about it. When I did, nothing disastrous happened. I got
Right.
treatment, and treatment worked, and I'm better. And that created a virtuous cycle where we're seeing now across, the 4 million or so members at UPMC that we work with, that more people are getting and accessing mental health services than at any time in our history. And so, on the one hand, you've got growing demand, which is concerning because, of course, that also means that people are suffering. But at the same time, it's also very encouraging that they are reaching out for help at a much greater rate. So now it's our responsibility as people in the mental health space, as providers, as insurance providers, to make sure that there's care when and where people want it.
So why is there such still a stigma? When we get injured, like break an arm or we have another illness, we get care quickly. But when it comes to mental health, we wait sometimes too late.
Well, first, I think uh, we have to acknowledge how far we've come. Mental Health Awareness Month is about 75 years old. And when it started in 1949, if you had a serious mental illness, odds were that you were being treated in a state hospital or some type of institution, what we called asylums back then. And really, nobody was talking openly and publicly about mental health. There was so much shame and stigma. People assumed that sometimes that it was a moral failing. If you had an addiction, people thought that that was a characterological problem, that there was, again, something wrong with how you thought in the world and how you behaved. We didn't understand it as a disease the way we do now. So we have to, I think, acknowledge and celebrate just how far we've come. Now, there's definitely, as you pointed out, Neil, more work to be done. So why do we still have this? Well, I think some of it is old attitudes in some areas die hard, right? And so there's been some persistence of that belief that that perhaps it's not actually an illness, that maybe it's just somebody not able to get through a hard time in their lives. Some of that's just right, our ethics and our morals. People,
Yeah.
in this country believe that, yeah, times are hard, but you gotta, soldier
Exactly.
through it.
Still think that mindset, but let's talk about why is it, let's say we get COVID, right? We heal,
Mhm.
we're better. We end up with a concussion. We heal, we're better mostly. We have a broken arm, or let's say even have like diabetes. We can cure diabetes. Why can't we cure mental illness? Or can we? Can we do that? Because that's where I think our goal needs to be. At one point in time, saying someone gets labeled a mental illness, it ends up hurting them in certain ways. We have to stop that from happening. That, okay, once we find out about this as an adult, you have a certain mental illness. Well, you can't be insured in certain places. You can't have this stuff. You're not able to get life insurance sometimes. And I think that's unfair. And, PTSD, think about the big thing of
Mhm.
PTSD. You get diagnosed with PTSD, you have a stigma. What, but if you end up with diabetes, but then yet you cure your diabetes, which can happen, you
Mhm.
cure cancer, you're not going to be told, oh, by the way, you had cancer. I think we have to figure out this more. This is a long process so that people will come forward, because if they think if they come forward, it's going to cost them a job to be a police officer, a job to maybe be
Mhm.
a teacher. That's my thoughts, of this.
Yeah, I think you're right, Neil. And unfortunately, we still find those pockets of stigma and bias and prejudice against mental health and substance use disorders out there. But I'm also encouraged by the fact that we have laws now in the books, for example, around mental health parity and requiring health insurers to really take and offer equitable benefits across physical health and behavioral health. And there are non-discriminatory laws around employment so that people who have a psychiatric disability cannot be discriminated
Oh, wow.
against in their workplace. That doesn't mean that people don't still have some biased attitudes, but we have come a long way in the legal realm to try to create some of those protections. Now we just have to continue to help support people, encourage them to get care when and where they need it, make sure that care is available, it's high quality, and celebrate the stories. In mental health, we talk a lot about recovery rather than cure. Although people can certainly and do every single day get treatment and fully recover from depression. They stop having panic attacks. They get to a point where their generalized anxiety is no longer interfering with their lives and preventing them from doing the things that they want to be doing. People with schizophrenia who no longer are bothered by voices or auditory hallucinations. People who once were plagued with suicidal thoughts or may have even attempted a suicide that no longer think about death and let that control them. So we have all of these great stories and of recovery and to celebrate. And more in this month in particular, it's becoming more acceptable, not just accepted, but celebrated for people to talk about those successes. When I went through medical school and became a psychiatrist, nobody was wearing a ribbon for mental illness in the way that we do for
Oh,
breast cancer and other things. But now look around in your community this May, and you'll see a lot of green light bulbs because green is the color of for mental health. And in May Mental Health Awareness Month, you'll see a lot of people changing out those lights, and a lot of cities, towns, uh,
yeah.
and and communities lighting up their town halls and town squares green. That it seems like a little thing, but it's really representative of a change in how we view mental health in this country.
Early identification is important as well. When you're going through having symptoms of PTSD or going through traumatic things that happen as a child, we are already giving them the resources necessary. So before they become adults, they have a lot more of an uphill battle than identifying early. That means early identification is the key, right?
Yeah, 100% right. The further upstream we can get, the more tools that we can equip a young person with. And it's not just the child or adolescent, it's also their family. It's so, so important. So that when we have someone, whether it's from a car accident or abuse or assault or witnessing something, really horrific or tragic, whenever there's been that exposure to trauma in a young person's life, we know that these events, which get called adverse childhood events or adverse or ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, can change the trajectory of a person's life forever. It increases, if untreated, increases the likelihood that they're going to have not just behavioral health challenges as they're older, but also their physical health is worse. They're more likely to be divorced, more likely to be involved in the criminal justice system. So your point about intervening early is so critical because when we do, we can change that arc of that young person's life forever in a positive direction, help them increase their graduation rates, help them have healthier relationships for the rest of their lives, help their overall behavioral health and physical health. And so all of that, however, it is dependent on early identification and intervention, just like you said, Neil.
Early identification intervention, such an important thing. Last thing we can kind of delve upon is the process of how can we have more and more people get into this profession so we can serve all our young people. This is something that needs to be, whoever becomes the next president of the United States sees this as a huge initiative to bring as many professionals into the mental health space as possible, to give them the resources, because everyone wants these resources, but sometimes they're not available because it's such a backup in what you guys do.
Yep, absolutely right. And it's such a rewarding time to come into the mental health field because there is so much need, and there've never been more ways for somebody who wants to go into the field to help serve and make a positive difference in somebody's life. You can continue to see people as a therapist, or as a social worker, as a psychologist, or a psychiatrist in an office. You can also do it virtually, and now we have that thousands of people receiving tele-behavioral health services every day at Community Care and UPMC. And that's true across the country. So if you want to, if somebody out there is thinking about what field they want to go in, where their skills and their talents will be needed and make a difference and literally save lives every single day, I would strongly encourage them to consider going into the mental health field. And you highlighted the importance of having policies at the, I would say, not just the national level, but also at the state and local level that support people making that choice. We've got lots of loan repayment programs, for example, for young people that want to get loan repayment if they go into the field, again, available in lots of different communities across the country. So lots of good things in place to help encourage us to have a workforce for tomorrow that can help us with our growing needs here.
All right. Best place people can find information on you and stuff. Where can they go for the? Mhm.
Sure. Yeah, I'm serve as the president and CEO of the honor of serving as the president and CEO of Community Care Behavioral Health, and I'm the vice president of behavioral health at UPMC Insurance Services Division. That's the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. So upmc.edu and ccbh.org.
All right. Thanks again, Dr. Matthew. Appreciate it. It was a great conversation.
Pleasure to be with you, Neil. Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Take care. You're listening to Washington, the Neil Haley